us today. We have some important things to cover. Father in heaven, we thank you for another beautiful day with the sun shining and how beneficial the sun is for us. And so we need to get out in that great out of doors that you have created. So bless us today as we endeavor to share one of the most important natural laws of health, which is nutrition. So guide us. May your Holy Spirit be here today and bless each person. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we're talking about those secrets to wellness, and we have briefly, very briefly, covered water, 8 ounce glasses of water every day, and purifying the entire system on the inside and also on the outside. On the outside, we need to bathe regularly. We need to get those toxins and those impurities just pushed right out. And so that's very, very important, with along, of course, clean clothing all the time, because the body absorbs this sweat. And so we need that water. Exercise, as you know, we studied that yesterday along with a few other things. We need to get a minimum of 30 minutes a day. That's the minimum. But really, to be healthy, we probably need to go up to that 60-minute mark, and I like to even go to the hour and a half, with 45 minutes often in the morning and 45 minutes in the evening. And then, of course, studies have shown that love and trust in God is so powerful that people actually, even under surgery, get better and recover more quickly when they have a support system of love and when they trust in God. And there's a whole section in the book on wellness on that you can cover later. And then lifestyle. We didn't cover even a portion in lifestyle. That is so important, to abstain from everything that's harmful. Abstaining from drugs and alcohol and even caffeine. And you know, this whole thing of alcohol is amazing, because even some Seventh-day Adventists, because of different studies that are saying that, it's moderate, a drinking of wine is okay because there are health benefits in wine. I've done thorough study on this, my friends, and it is the nutrients and everything is in the grapes, not in the alcohol. And the Lancet, which is like the American Medical Journal in the United States from England, has just come out. And I'm so glad. I wish that I could have even put it into my book, the next one it will go into, because they have documented and said that studies show there is absolutely no safe limits of alcohol. And that's from the Lancet, which is like the journal, American Journal of Medicine here in the United States. And so that's another whole thing, and I give all the benefits in my book on grapes. And so you can study that later, because God made it in the pure grape. And so we have so many things in the lifestyle, and then that means also using moderately that which is good. So it doesn't mean that we can just indulge in all of these things, but that we use moderately that which is good. And then environment, which is the air and breathing. God made us to be outside, to live outside, but we live inside so much, and we need that sunshine and that fresh air and breathing deeply so that we get air into our lungs and all of that. And then sleep. Now, I'm going to mainly cover nutrition today, but I thought just to give you a little bit. Now, sleep is something very interesting, because of all the 8 natural remedies, most of us can have control over them. In fact, we can have control over 7 of them. Sleep is very interesting because God gives sleep. Now, we can do several things to improve our sleep, and I've listed a whole lot of things that we can do to improve our sleep. But there are times when we may go to bed on time, but we just can't sleep. And so we have to pray that God will give us sleep, but there are some things that we can do to improve the sleep, but it's not as easily controlled as some of the other natural laws of health. But as I was studying this, I realized, and on page 183 of the wellness book, I explained that there are basically 4 stages of sleep. You have non-REM sleep and you have REM sleep. And the reason that this is so important to go to bed early and get that sleep is that we need to go through those stages of sleep several times in order to be physically and mentally revived. Because when you go into that first stage of sleep, that's when you're easily awakened. You almost are, conscious of even things around you. And then when you get into the third stage of sleep, you have a deep sleep. And that is when we build the body. So we're building the body, and it revives itself through that sleep. And then you go in, that's non-REM. Then when you go into rapid eye movement, which is the REM sleep, when you get into that, you get into the dreaming stage, and that's when you build the brain and the mind. So if you're a dreamer, praise the Lord. Because when you are dreaming, you are actually building the body, and you are building that, building the mind when you get into the dreaming stage. I explain all of that there, and studies prove that we need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. That's the norm for an adult. Now, how in the world do you know whether you are sleep deprived? I can give you an easy remedy of knowing how you can tell whether you have not had enough sleep. If you are tired during the day, or if you're sleeping in my lecture, you haven't gotten enough sleep. Seriously, if you're tending to sleep when you get in the car, when it's moving, if you tend to sit in the easy chair and you want to sleep, you're probably sleep deprived. And so we need to make sure that we're getting, like those children do, at night, a good night's rest. And that's why children can go all day without, now there's a time when they're really young when they need that nap, but then as they get a little older and they hit that pillow, they go to sleep, they sleep well, they get up, and they don't have any sleep deprivation most of the time during the day. And that's the way we should be. So if you're rested and getting enough sleep. Now, studies showed that some people, a very small minority, could get along between 6.5 and 7, but that was a small minority, and another minority needed actually 8.5 to 9 hours of sleep. And then most of us needed 7 to 8. And then how can you know which category you're in? If you're sleeping and you're fully rested when you get up in the morning, and you can go all day until you go again. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have a little nap to just revive 10 to 15, 20 minutes. That's good for us too, and I talk about that. But basically speaking, if you're tired and you're sleeping in a meeting, or when you're studying, or when you're in the car, or in a meeting, then you're probably sleep deprived, and we need that rest to build the body and build the mind. And anyway, there's a whole section in our book on that as well. But now I want to cover a very most important subject, and we'll have some questions and we can do some things after. But I've been teaching. Some ask, how have you been teaching for 50 years? Well, I started in 1969 in our first district in Quinnebog, Connecticut. Some of my little friend Linda is here today, and she was in that church back then. and we started over in the Brimfield area, my first cooking school in 1969. Now, let me tell you why I continued, because I saw that we could also have people from the community coming, and they would ask questions about why we're doing this. And I had Joanne ask me, why are you doing this? I was a young preacher's wife, 24 years old, you know. I wasn't quite sure, except my husband said, I think because our district needs some help, you should do a cooking school. And I said, Mark Finley, I've never done one in my life. And I said, I'm an elementary education teacher. That's what I studied. I don't know how to do a cooking school. He said, oh, it's easy. And I said, if it's so easy, you help me. And so I said, let's begin gathering scientific information. And to this day, Mark will still work with me in presenting some of the scientific evidence in a cooking school of nutrition. And so I do the nutritional part, I do the demonstrations and the practical, and he will have some part in that as well. But the reason I continued is that in that first cooking school, we studied with Joanne, we studied with her husband, we studied with her parents and her brother and sister-in-law, and all 6 of them were baptized into that church. And I said, right then and there, Lord, if this is not only a way of helping people live longer, healthier, and happier, but it's also a way of bringing people in to the Three Angels message and God's Remnant Church, I will do this the rest of my life. And I have. I have just finished another cooking school, and so I've added many other classes since then, exercise classes, stress management classes, hydrotherapy classes, wellness classes, all kinds of things since then. But nutrition has been something that I've been really focusing in on, and it's so important. So let's look at good nutrition is essential for good health. If we're going to have good health, we need to have good nutrition. So I've tried to summarize. I had so many things that I wanted to share with you, but I tried to compact it and put some of the most important things. And so I thought, let's just narrow this down to a few principles of good health. And here's what they are. The key principles of good nutrition are: number 1, choose the right kind of foods. Number 2, choose the right time to eat, the right time, and then choose the right amount of food. So it's choosing the right food, it's choosing the right times to eat, and believe me, you realize that when you go overseas and go to Europe particularly. I mean, there are people eating at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. It's amazing. So why is that harmful to our health? We're going to study that. And then choosing the right amount of food. We can only handle so much food. And when we get those extra calories and it gets into overweight or obesity, that's when we shorten our lives. There's no question about it that our lives are shortened as a result of being over-caloried. And so we're going to talk about all of that. But first, let's go to principle number 1. Well, good nutrition, we need to choose the right kinds of foods. What are the right kinds? What are we going to put in that grocery basket? What are we going to set on our tables? What kind of, yes, let's study it and see why. Let's read together what God says in Genesis 1:29. Let's read it together. And God said, "See, I have given you every plant-yielding seed that is on the face of all the land, and every tree with seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food." So God says, I'm giving you fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables. So the Eden diet was a plant-based vegetarian food. That's what it was. It was plant-based. Now, if some of you are thinking, well, what about the root vegetables? And, you know, that came after sin, yes, but God still gave that as our original diet. And let's look at Counsels on Diets and Foods, page 81. It says, grains. Let's read it together so you can get it in your brain. Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods, prepared in as simple and natural a manner as possible, are the most healthful and nourishing. What are the most healthful and most nourishing? Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables. And then let's read on. They impart a strength, a power of endurance, and a vigor of intellect that are not afforded by a more complex and stimulating diet. So you're going to improve physically, mentally, and even spiritually when we follow this diet. And yet, my friends, I'm sad to tell you that the latest statistics show that there are 52% of Seventh-day Adventists that are not vegetarians. 52%. And only 8% are plant-based vegetarians. So when you look at all of this, and I want to share with you how we can transition to some of this, because it is the best. It's going to give you power of intellect. It's going to give you strength. It's going to give you endurance. It's going to give you everything. It's just amazing. So we can't improve on the Creator's plan. We can't that He gave us right from the beginning. There's no way of improving on this. No matter what people say, well, my grandfather lived until he was 85, 90, and he didn't do all of that. Well, there may be some other factors, and who knows what kind of productive life they had, but God's plan is the very best. Now, medical researchers have also discovered that some foods are protective foods against the killer diseases of the 21st century. So what are these? And you know what's so exciting, my friends, is that we have had this council for well over 150 years. 1863, Ellen White, right here in this territory in Otsego, Michigan, had her first vision on the health message. And God showed her these things. In fact, many times she says, God showed me. And it was not easy to present those health principles in her day, believe me. But medical science is now catching up. It's amazing. So what are those protective foods? Science says they are plant-based foods such as fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables. So those are the protective foods to protect us against diabetes too, and obesity, and heart disease, and cancer, and even Alzheimer's, and all the rest. These are the protective foods. It's very difficult even for, and I recognize there's a stage and a place where cancer gets to the place where it is very hard to keep it under control. But it's very hard if a person is eating a lot of broccoli and a lot of cauliflower and a lot of berries and all these things for cancer. Cancer feeds on fat and sugar. That's what it feeds on. And so these are protective, actual protective foods. And population groups who eat a wide variety of protective foods have a reduced rate of cancer and heart disease. And so there's no question about these being protective. And documented scientific evidence confirms the validity of a plant-based diet. Now let me share with you the fact that when I started in 1969, there were not studies out on a plant-based diet. In fact, you couldn't even find a cookbook that was a plant-based cookbook. I had to develop my own. Now that was good because I was forced into it, and I had to develop my own recipes. That's why when someone asked me, how long did it take you to do this cookbook? I said 50 years. 50 years, because I was developing all my own through the years. But if you're talking about just the pictures and the food that we made in here, it took me 12 hours a day for 6 days a week, all except Sabbath, to make the food and have the pictures for 3 weeks, 3 solid weeks. So you don't do one very easily or quickly, but God blessed, because I came to the place where I said, I need to have something very specific for people, something that's easy, something that's simple, something with a few ingredients, not a whole list of many ingredients that you can't even get at your grocery store. And I said, then I want them to see what it looks like. So I have a picture for every one of the recipes in there. But it didn't come very easily because there was nothing. Now we have a lot of plant-based cookbooks and some good, very good ones as well. But we need to keep it simple for people, especially non-Adventists when they come. They said, I love being at your cooking school and learning these things and going through the cookbook because it's so simple. I can get it at my grocery store and there's not a lot of ingredients and it's so simple. And that's what we need to do, is make it simple. But science is proving all of the validity of a plant-based diet. And over 200 studies, there's even more than that now, in the last 25 years have shown those eating a plant-based foods have 50% less cancer. And why are so many people getting these chronic diseases today? It's because we're not following the laws of health, basically. Now, I recognize, as I've said before, there are hereditary, there are environmental factors, but basically it's our lifestyle choices. And God placed all the ingredients that we need in a plant-based diet. We're not lacking. In fact, a vegetarian diet contains adequate carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and all the rest. It's amazing. And Ellen White says, she said long ago in 1868, before they ever knew about some of these things that we know today. In 1868, she says, in grains, fruits, vegetables, and nuts are to be found all the elements that we need. The elements are the nutritional elements. And even B12, and I'm not going to get in on that because a lot of people ask me about B12 on a plant-based diet, and all I can say is this: all the evidence isn't in now. If you think you're lacking in B12, then you may need a supplement. So I will say that, because you can't reverse the lack of B12. But if you're eating any fortified food and you're eating natural foods and you're using nutritional yeast or whatever, and some other foods, and we do make B12 in the mouth as well, and so if you're eating some organic foods, you're going to get some B12. My husband and I have a B12 test every single year with our health assessment, and we are always way up there past the norm, and we're total plant-based vegetarians. And so I can tell you that all the studies aren't in on B12, but be careful, because we do need to make sure that we are not lacking in B12. We have a whole lot of things we could say on that, but Ellen White clearly says that all the elements that we need are in fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables. So we need to teach natural lifestyle cooking. It doesn't have to be my program, but I do have a workbook that churches can take and actually go through 7 classes with the public, because we need to not only keep this to ourselves, but we need to teach it to others. And so I have 7 classes, because when I taught, I didn't know what to do. I went into that first cooking school and I thought, this is going to be a total disaster. I mean, I don't know how to do this. But you know what? God gave us 6 souls, and I don't know how many others. Only in eternity will we know what really happens. But I didn't know what I was doing. And now, so I said, I'm going to do a workbook on these classes. So we have an entire workbook. I have a short little DVD as well that takes the 7 classes, and they're only 30 minutes, so a person can use them in their church and do fewer demonstrations, because I take them through bread, how to make it from start to finish. On breakfast, several things that we demonstrate. And then you can have something locally so that you just demonstrate a few things, make a few samples. I can't make the samples for you, But you make a few samples, then you give them to people. So we do have materials today, and that's why I've done this book, because it's so we need to teach natural lifestyle cooking, because natural lifestyle cooking is going to change the entire health of many people. I can tell you, it really will. And so, and again, let's read Counsels on Diets and Foods, page 380, written in 1890. Let's read it together. Again and again, I've been shown by who? By God, that God is trying to lead us back step by step to his original design, that man should subsist upon the natural products of the earth. So God is trying to tell us, and as God's people, as Seventh-day Adventists, as God's remnant people for today, we have everything and all the nutrients that we need in what God gave us right from the beginning. Then let's read on. Not an ounce of flesh meat should enter our stomachs. The eating of flesh is unnatural. We are to return to God's original purpose in the creation of man. I tell you, my translator in Tanzania was so excited about this. She said, when you're translating, I don't understand everything she's saying, okay? When I got to this, because I was now teaching the pastors and pastors' wives, and we were in class, and she said, she saw my graphics and my slides, and I'm trying to delete, because you're translating and it takes up time. And she said, no, don't delete. She said, we need to teach them that, because so many of our even workers, our pastors, are not vegetarians, and we need this, and not a ounce of flesh meat should enter our stomachs. Well, I knew when she wasn't translating everything, or she was translating more than I said, because when she came to this, she says, hallelujah, praise God. And so she was so excited, because she actually was very influential even in the government, and we influenced schools because of her, not because of me, but we were able to have them in our meetings and influence. Schools were making entire changes in their school programs and everything. And so I can tell you the public is open for this, but not an ounce of flesh meat should enter our stomachs. The eating of flesh is unnatural. It's unnatural. And we are to return. And then let's read this one. The light given me is that it will not be very long before we shall have to give up using any animal food. Even milk will have to be discarded. Disease is accumulating rapidly. She wrote that in 1899. And you know what? She also says we will know when the time has come. And we know. I got soy milk right in our hotel this morning. And soy milk and almond milk came in when prominent people are now becoming plant-based vegetarians. Because some of you probably saw the interview with former President of the United States, Bill Clinton. Did you see that? Yes. Well, when he was asked by Wolf Blitzer, the anchor of CNN, one of the anchors, he said, Mr. Former President, why are you a plant-based vegetarian? And he said, well, first of all, I want to lose weight for Chelsea's wedding. And then he said, but look, I had a triple bypass, and I learned from several physicians, and he had several, he could have all he wanted, that the only way to reverse heart disease was on a plant-based diet. And so I adopted a plant-based diet. And then he said, Wolf Blitzer said to him, well, Mr. Former President, what do you eat for breakfast? And he said, cereal. And he said, well, what do you put on your cereal? And he said, almond milk. And now you could find almond milk in every store, in Walmart, in the pharmacies, everywhere. So we have everything here today that we didn't have when I started 50 years ago. And so if we're talking about a plant-based diet, And I have a whole section in the book, I won't go over it in detail, of the hierarchy of foods, because now I came up with this term of hierarchy of foods because what do you want to try to eat mostly of? Yes, out of category 1, you want to eat fresh fruit, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. Eat them in abundance. And so then you have number 2, which is cooked vegetables, grains, and legumes. So you want to make sure that you're getting fresh things. That's why I'm writing my next book on hospitality and fellowship meals, because I'm finding that at the potlucks, many potlucks, they don't even have any fresh things, and we need more. And so that's where we need to eat in abundance. We need to eat plentiful also of our grains and legumes, but those are going to be cooked, okay? And then you have nutritious processed foods, like your canned applesauce. My husband and I can fresh applesauce. We go to the orchard, pick them ourselves, make it into applesauce, and we can 150 quarts, because that's a staple in our home. 150 quarts. The only thing I do is process it enough to ensure the seal. That's what Ellen White says. Just process it enough to ensure the seal. There's no sugar, no preservatives, nothing in it except applesauce, except apples. And so there are some nutritious processed foods. But then you go down from that and you say, okay, if you're not a plant-based diet, then what do? Well, if you're eating some dairy and eggs, just limit until you can avoid, okay? Just limit that until you can avoid. And then lean, clean animal foods, if you're eating that, try to limit until you avoid. And then unhealthy processed foods. I mean, those are the sugar-laden foods, the soft drinks, and I just say, avoid them completely. There's no need for them. And so try to get rid of them, because it might be a little easier than some of the others. And then when you get down to the bacon, cold cuts, all the processed meats, just avoid them. Scripture, of course, for Seventh-day Adventists, we don't use those kind of things anyway because they're unclean. But when I'm talking with non-Adventists, I have to kind of, explain that a little bit. And then the alcohol, the tea, the coffee, and I share in my classes that it's best to just avoid that, because it's affecting our health in a detrimental way. So I have a whole thing on the hierarchy of foods, but look, there are many advantages of a total plant-based diet. Let's just go over a few of them. First, it's rich in phytochemicals and antioxidants. What are phytochemicals? Phyto simply means plant, so they are plant chemicals that are natural nutrients in the plant. Phytochemicals are protective chemicals only found in plant food. So it's not found in animal food. And look, I eat tomatoes. I ate them again for breakfast this morning. I eat tomatoes almost every day. They're filled with phytochemicals. I mean, there's like hundreds of thousands of phytochemicals in tomatoes. And there are many other foods too, berries and many things, and tofu even. And I know there's a whole thing on soybeans. I just did a thorough study on this, and soybeans are good. After I did my study, when someone said, there's all these things out about soybeans, and after I did my study, I was more convinced I needed to eat my edamame. And so they're packed with protective phytochemicals, and they have lots of protein, and they can actually reduce the risk of cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, rectal cancer, lung cancer, and stomach cancer. And what are antioxidants? Well, they are chemicals found in food that prevent or repair damage to the cells caused by substances called free radicals. And the highest antioxidants are found in berries. In fact, I went to the store to get some nice organic berries so that we could even have it at the hotel. And I had blackberries this morning, and raspberries, and blueberries, and strawberries even. And so just try to eat some of those. Someone says it's expensive. Well, it's more expensive to get all those pills and also for a heart attack and all the rest and hospitalization than it is to buy a few berries. And so they're high. And a plant-based diet also can reduce the risk and reverse heart disease. So pretty powerful, actually. It reduces the risk of cancer. And a plant-based diet contains alkaline forming foods. You see, the right kind of foods that we need are the alkaline forming. The typical Western diet is acidic forming. And it's at least good to have at least 50% or more of your alkaline forming foods. Alkaline forming foods include your fruits, your vegetables, lentils, seeds, and some nuts. Some nuts are, and some grains are actually acidic forming, but we need those B vitamins and the nutrients in that, so that's where we get the other percent. And so we need the alkaline forming foods. But acidic foods include meat, fish, poultry, eggs, processed foods, desserts, fast foods, and most grains. Millet is all alkaline forming, and there are some, but we need those nutrients, so that's where you get the other percent. But many problems are associated with our body being too acidic, and high acidic foods produce free radicals. And these free radicals are what set the stage for your cancer, your heart disease, and many other of the chronic diseases. So for good nutrition, we need to reduce the cholesterol intake. And the high cholesterol, of course, is in your animal foods. And you have plant foods, there's no cholesterol. No cholesterol in your plant foods. And eggs are one of the highest known sources of cholesterol to man. And when I'm in my cooking schools, people don't even miss anything because we're not taking anything away from them. What we're doing is giving them so much more. Wow, these pancakes were absolutely delicious. Flaxseed, oatmeal, blueberry pancakes, all of these pancakes that I have in my recipe book. And we're making these delicious foods, and they're saying, wow, I didn't know I could have all these things, some waffles, and all this with no egg. Most pancakes and waffles are just basically white flour, sugar, fat, and, that's and eggs, and milk and eggs. That's basically what it is. And Dr. Nedley says, in Proof Positive, a high intake of cholesterol, which is present in meat, eggs, and dairy products, has been linked to an increased incidence of cancer in several studies. So it is amazing. And a high-fat diet contributes to cancer and heart disease. And Ellen White clearly says, let's read it together. She said in 1886, before they ever knew about some of these things, the liability to take disease is increased tenfold by meat eating. Tenfold, 10 times by just eating meat. And our people need to understand that this is detrimental to their health. We're not talking about being fanatical or anything else. Now, some people in my day, when I went on a plant-based diet, they thought, oh, this is fanatical, because in 1960s and 70s, but I had to forge ahead anyway. And I'm glad I came up with the name way back then of natural lifestyle cooking, because I have it today as well. But let's see, even Science, an article titled Animal Protein Linked to Death by Thomas Campbell. It's the son of the Campbell who wrote the China book study. And this is what he said. A study released this week shows that among two very large American study populations, both female nurses and male health professionals, that those that consumed the most animal protein compared to plant protein had a higher risk of death. Now, we're not talking about disease. We're talking higher risk of death, particularly cardiovascular disease. People are just dying. Even Adventists are dying of cardiovascular disease. And those consuming the most plant protein were found to have 33% reduced risk of death and 40% reduced risk of cardiovascular death, and 28% reduced risk of cancer death. Now that's pretty highly motivating, isn't it? Because we're not talking about just getting the disease, we're talking about death. And these are studies from non-Adventist scientists and medical personnel. It's amazing. And what does Ellen White say? Before they even came up with this study was done in, what was the date there? Some of you noticed it, 2015, something like that. Yeah, 2015, 2016. Now, look, she wrote in 1902, let's read it. Cancers, tumors, and pulmonary diseases are largely caused by meat eating. Largely caused by meat eating. What are pulmonary diseases? Those are lung diseases, exactly. And you know what? Why are even some Adventists that have never smoked a day in their life getting lung diseases? Because cancers, tumors, and pulmonary diseases are largely caused by meat eating. And yet, we need to help our own people, my friends. Not only the public, we do need to help the public, but we need to also help our own people to see that there's something better. And let's read this one. 1868, she wrote this. Many die of diseases wholly due to meat eating when the real cause is scarcely suspected by themselves or others. People have no idea that's why they're dying. They're eating all this meat, and they're putting all this fat and cholesterol into their system, and they don't even recognize this is what's causing their death. It's just incredible. I am so thankful, my friends, for the health message. I am so thankful that as Seventh-day Adventists, God had compassion on us to give us the great health message. And it's amazing. And Ellen White clearly says, I don't have time to get into that, but she says it's clearly tied to the three angels message. And she says it's part and parcel of the three angels message. It's part of the three angels message. It's amazing. And so for good nutrition, we also need lots of fiber. All fruit is an abundance of fiber. You're going to get plenty of fiber if you're eating whole grains. They're rich in fiber, carbohydrates, dietary fiber, vitamins, minerals, host of phytochemicals. You can even add some beans to your breakfast and add a little fiber. Beans are wonderful. We could be eating beans every day. Beans are so good. Even the white beans. In fact, white beans have as much nutrition as some of the other beans, the black beans and the red beans. We wouldn't think about that. I grew up on Boston baked beans. And so because I grew up in Maine and then in Massachusetts, and you have Boston baked beans. We had some delicious ones here yesterday at the cafeteria. Beans are good for us, and they're not only delicious but satisfying. So start your day with a good breakfast. I start my husband with a good breakfast. We had some guests, and I had a big fruit plate that I have every day for my family, for my husband now, and I did for our children when they were growing up. But I fixed this big fruit platter, and they said, "Oh, we didn't know we were this special that you fixed this big fruit platter just for us." I said, "I fix it every day for my husband." And so, we can jumpstart our whole day with lots of fiber by having a good breakfast. And a good breakfast contains lots of grains and nuts and seeds and all those high fiber foods. Plant-based vegetarians have plenty of healthy choices. Plenty of healthy choices. So how much fiber do we need? Do you know how much fiber? 30, we should have a minimum or amount of 30 grams a day, but how much do you think Americans get? They get half of the amount, 50%. They're not getting more than 15%. And in China, it's much lower. I had to talk to them about fiber there because they're eating all the white rice and they're not getting a lot of high fibrous foods. But here in this country, we're only getting about 50%. Why is fiber so important? because fiber stimulates the colon to discharge the waste faster and reduces that concentration of harmful substances that remain in the colon. So you're just pushing that through, and that's what the fiber does. And so that means it can reduce, again, the risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. So what do we need to do, my friends? We need to increase our consumption of fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables. And particularly fruits. Ellen White clearly says in so many places that, especially for mental workers, she says that we could do very well to eat more fruit, eat more foods in its natural state. And we would be, and you know what? We can learn to really like this. Oh, I can't wait to eat my mangoes and my berries and all of these things. They're so good. And kiwis, they're so high in those antioxidants and all the other foods. It's amazing. So we should at least, in fact, I said 5 to 9. Our middle daughter, our oldest daughter, is a neurologist. She's a specialist in Parkinson's disease. And our middle daughter is a registered dietitian. She works for Amen. And our son is in dermatology. So they're all in the medical field. He sees about 35 patients every day, detecting cancer every day. And when my daughter, middle daughter, worked in the children's hospital in Denver, they were putting 5 a day all over the hospital. Make sure these children have 5 fruits and veggies a day. But now nutritionists are saying, no, we need 9 a day. So we can get them easily. If you're eating 3 meals a day, 3 for breakfast, 3 vegetables easy for lunch if you're eating a good salad, and maybe 2 or 3 in the evening. But anyway, it's amazing. I have to share with you this, that the USDA has come a long way from, from the basic 7 to the basic 4 to the pyramid and all the rest. And now they're saying, okay, we need vegetables, fruits, grains, and protein, and dairy. That's what they say. But they're not quite there, because Harvard says we need more fruits and vegetables, legumes, grains, and nuts and seeds. So look what Harvard University Medical School came out with. They said, okay, Mr. Government, yes, we need the vegetables, we need the fruits, but not just grains. We need whole grains. And they said not just protein, but healthy protein, including those beans, and cutting out processed meat completely. This is what they're saying. And you can replace that dairy even with some water up there. This is the newest chart from Harvard University Medical School. I have that in my book as well. And also I have some of this in the Natural Lifestyle Cooking Workbook as well, so you can get more on that. But a plant-based diet was chosen for mankind by our Creator. And then principle number 2, we're not going to have a lot of time to go over it, but we just need to eat at the right times. 2 to 3 meals a day. That's it. Nothing in between. Basically, and Ellen White clearly says, let's read it, 5 hours at least should elapse between each meal. And always bear in mind that if we would give it a trial, that you'd find that 2 meals are even better than 3. So no more than 3. Some people do need 3 to maintain their body weight, and some people can do very well on 2. That means your biggest meal in the morning, a good meal, if you eat at 7 or 8, then you eat at 1 o'clock or whatever in the afternoon, then you can eat something either light in the evening or nothing at all. And so you'll do very well on that. And look, even science is saying it. Again, Luigi Fontana, co-founder of the longevity research, says fasting for as little as 16 hours could improve some health measures and counteract disease processes. Science is saying if you let up on that supper a little bit and you fast through the night, you're going to counteract some of these diseases. I mean, and we could give you so much more. It is amazing. But then we need to just hasten on here. Principle number 3 is eat the right amount of food. What is the right amount? I can't tell you because I don't know. because it changes with our metabolism, with so many things. But one thing is for sure, that you will gain or lose weight about your calorie intake and your calorie and burning up the calories. So that's what it is. And basically, if you're gaining weight, you're eating too much. And if you're losing weight, you may need to eat a little more. So that's how you know. And you know another way, you can just look in the mirror. Am I overweight? You know, and I know it's not easy, my friends, but God can give us strength to do these things. And you know what? So here they are. The right kinds of foods, the right time to eat, the right amount to eat. And here's your prescription for the day. Eat a wide variety of fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables, and you're going to be healthier. And I know that God, so here's some teeny tips. Well, you can look at them in the book, but basically eat a plant-based diet, reduce your fat and cholesterol consumption, reduce the sugar consumption, reduce the salt. We need some salt, but maybe use that in cooking rather than at the table, and increase your consumption of vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, and eat a substantial breakfast. Allow 5 hours between your meals if we want to be living to that healthy 100. So here it is, all in a nutshell, my friends. I think this is God's health assurance plan. And we've been holding cooking schools and teaching this to the public since 1969 in Broomfield, Massachusetts, in our first district. And I can tell you that people are responding. I had a lady at the grocery store where I live come out, and she saw me, and she came to our cooking school, and she had 2 bags, and she said, "Look, I have my almond milk, I have all these fresh veggies, and I have all this fresh fruit." And she said, "Look at my bags, look what I'm doing. I'm making a big lifestyle change. We've been meat eaters, and we're trying to do this." They're non-Adventists coming to our church, coming to our programs. And so we have a cookbook, we have a workbook, we have an instructor book, we have the DVDs, everything you need to do something in your church to help not only your people, but many non-Adventists who will come to Jesus as a result of your cooking school. And so let's open it up for a few questions here before we finish. This is our last class. Yes?
So have you heard about lectives? Because I don't agree with this guy. He's a cardiologist, and he's at Loma Linda, and he says we should avoid tomatoes, beans, da-da-da-da. And I have some friends with health problems, and they're doing this, avoiding all this stuff. And I'm like,
I can tell you that there's a statement in Spirit of Prophecy that says the best food for Ellen White was tomatoes. And so all I do is, if God says it, I do it. And I try to present it. I don't know all of the different things, and I would have to study all of these things to know some answers to some of that. But what I do is simply this. I take I take the medical scientific information as it is confirmed with the Spirit of Prophecy. That's what I try to do. Yes? Yes, it's best if we can. I try to, the berries that I got for this morning, I knew I paid a little more for them, but I try to do as much organic as possible. It's best if we can. We might not do everything organically, but I do my flour for sure. I make my own bread, and I get organic flour. Because basically, most of the GMOs are in your wheat and in your soybeans and this kind of thing. So I try to buy organic beans, organic wheat, and make my bread. And it's the best, but it can be expensive. I don't do everything organic. You just have to do the best you can. It far and away is better than the meat diet and the animal diet. Yes?
It's great that you're helping us. My burden is with the younger folk. I mean, what can we do for children, especially out in the schools? The public school system has actually adopted this, and they're doing great for the children. I mean, they're giving great options for the children in public school. My burden
Okay, she's right on. You're very fortunate. You have a good diet here, at least what I've experienced already in the cafeteria. But it is true, in some of our schools, they have high fat, high cheese, high animal product, your milk, eggs, and cheese, and that kind of thing. And they have a lot of fat, a lot of deep fried, a lot of this kind of thing. So all I can say is if we can teach this in our churches, go to our pastors, and help them to work with the principals of schools and say, look, our young people need to eat a better diet, that this could help. I can tell you, I worked in the Cayman Islands with a chef from public schools. A friend asked me to come down that has influence in the Cayman Islands with many of these people, invited a chef, and he, at first, I just did my demos, I showed my slides, I had all these demonstrations of things they could do in the schools, and then it was interesting because he said, well, for a steak man, this is pretty good, and I think we could use some of this in our schools, and he said, we do need a change, and you know what? There are even public schools that are making these changes. So I do think that we need to try to help our schools, our pastors, our leaders in the church to present these things, because there are some churches that even serve meat at their potlucks. And it's very unfortunate. Oh yeah, I know of many places. So we can improve, I know. Any other questions here? Yes.
You said the soybean, the Edmonic bean, I believe you said you studied it and it was real good.
Yes, there are, you see, it's the dairy industry and some of the other industries that are upset with all the things that are coming out with the soybean milks and all the rest, because it's shelf space that they're struggling for. And the shelf space, but if you study this, I don't have time to give you a study on it today, but I can tell you that the soybeans are good. And again, if you can get them organically, that's the best.
The only thing I wanted to say about that is like the bean that you talked about, the Edamame, how do you say it?
Edamame.
Yeah, is good. But when they make the other things, they have to chemically process that to make the bean proper and so on.
You need to be more careful when you get all the processed foods, any processed foods. What I try to do in all my cooking schools is basically make everything from scratch. There's a lot of things. However, Ellen White did say that also God was going to guide this church and teach them how to make soy products and other meat substitutes that would be innovative and creative, and that God would teach his people to do this. So there are some things, but we need to look at all the processing as well. And the way I do it is, what I say basically is this in my cooking schools. The best is this: fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables in their natural state as much as possible. And organically at that. So that's the very best. Yes?
I got a challenging one for you.
Oh boy. If I can answer it, I'll try, but if I can't...
Maybe it's for all of us. Many of us who knew Brad Jolly, who was a missionary in Mongolia, also Gloria Lawson, maybe leads many cookbooks, who's a dietitian also, was asked to go to Russia, northern Russia. And where we run into a problem is these people, where they live, fruits and vegetables, don't exist. Brad Jolly died of colon cancer because he couldn't get the fruits up there or the vegetables. Where I'm going with this, also in Russia, and Gloria wanted to go, and we were going to help her and everything. Our cookbooks were irrelevant to them because they can't even afford to buy the nuts and stuff. So maybe we need to ask the Lord, or maybe he'll challenge you. You need a cookbook or something for these poor people, because you guys, we have to be honest. Jesus died for them too.
Of course.
They want the health message, but if you can't afford the health message, you know
Well,
what I'm saying?
I've been in some of these countries. I've been in Russia. I've done, lectures and cooking schools and other things in Poland and in some of these other places.
In Siberia were places, just like in where Brad was, where you can
I can show you a statement. I don't have the page on the tip of my tongue, but it says all over the world, in every country, God has provided, and I'm stopping, God has provided the foods necessary for that country. When we were in Poland and all we had was apples and potatoes and beets and those kind of things, then you do the best you can. So all I can say is that we do the best we can, and God will bless. But yes, we do need to, and I can tell you in Russia, because I worked with the health ministry director there, she has provided a cookbook for all of Russia, and she's taken some of my materials as well, and she's providing it for there. And I can tell you in Bulgaria, in India, in Africa, and many of these places, things are being provided. And so God, but
15 years ago, we wanted to go, and half a team from Canada were going to go somewhere, Andrews didn't go because it was like, they said, you can't give us anything.
yeah. Well, I was recently in Russia, and I can tell you that things are being done and some other things, yes. Okay, we need to stop. We're over time here, but we're going to give you a break, and Pastor, you may have something you want to say at the end and have prayer for us. And God bless each of you. I just pray that you will adopt some of these principles, not only yourself, but teach your churches, and then teach the public, the people in your areas. There are people that want to know these things. And you can do a wellness program, my friends, and do it even on an all-day Sunday and cover. I've covered in 3 classes, very limited, but if you have even from 9 to 5, you can do a lot of things, or you can do it in 8 weeks, or you can do it in 4 weeks, or whatever. But my advice to you is try to teach these things to your own people in your churches and in your communities. God bless you. May I have prayer?